without further ado, I wanted to introduce you guys to Mark McTaggart, if you don't really know him. So he's a social enterprise consultant and coach, and one of the co-founders of Rebellion, which is a support network and to support businesses, specifically social enterprises. You can find them on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, which is all there. And yeah, over to you, Mark. The session I've worked with Mark quite a while now, actually, on lots of different things. And something that comes up quite a lot, especially in social enterprises, is how to actually apply for funding and the journey and the challenges that come up with that. Just a little bit of context. So Mark's been on both sides of kind of funding. So he has been someone who's been giving out funding and understands what kind of criteria and what makes a good bid, and also has supported and has also applied for funding on the other side as well. So very much has both those perspectives. And this session, he's going to share everything he knows, top tips, all that kind of thing, answer kind of any questions around common challenges as well. Over to you, Mark.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah, and hi, everybody. Lovely to see you all this morning. Had a bit of a technology nightmare myself this morning. Did the old auto update 5 minutes before I was meant to start, so that was a nice little preparation. Yeah, well, you've introduced me really, Sarah, so I can't really, that seemed like my life history. That was brilliant. It's I suppose with funding, and why I'm doing this, as Sarah said, I started off my life in this sector years and years ago as a long-haired sort of hippie temp, working for the National Lottery, as it was then when it first started out, and became a grants officer somehow there, and so that began my whole journey really of sort of getting involved in social enterprise and the charity sector. So I saw it from that side, but I've kind of, I guess, fallen into bid writing because people want it a lot of the time, and I had to do a lot of it from previous roles, sort of managing charities and social enterprises and the like. You sort of fall into bid writing. So I would say, rather than being sort of an expert, or that's done lots of sort of qualifications and things over it, it's just more experience really, and having to do it. So it's not something that everyone really loves doing, and it can be a bit of a chore, but it can be really useful, I suppose, to get you started, to fund things that you can't fund through the commercial side of what you're doing. So the real sort of social impact side that you might not be able to fund by selling something, perhaps. So it is useful. No one really likes it. No one really likes doing it, but it's good to know, I guess, how to do it. So that's a bit about me really, and my background with this. And I want it to be quite an interactive session really. So I'll have to keep popping my glasses on if I'm looking at the chat all the time. So I'm quite happy for you to unmute yourselves and sort of ask questions if you're not understanding what I said. I will talk at you a little bit at the beginning, just to share a little bit of content, but there's plenty of time for questions at the end, so we'll try and save up your questions if you can. But if there's something that you're really not understanding I'm saying, just raise your hand or shout at me. That's absolutely fine. So first off, I thought what would be really useful is if you could just go round and say what your experience of bid writing is. How's it been for you? Is it have you done it before? You're totally new to it? Have you done loads of it and looking for some other tips? Do you hate it? Do you love it? That sort of thing. So shall we start with you, Jenny?
Hello there. So would bid writing, does that include, like, if you go for kind of awards and grants and things like that? Is that's what you mean?
Yeah. Sorry, when I say bid writing, I'm really looking at grant funding, I suppose. Yeah. But it can be in other things, of course.
Yeah. Well, last year we tried for a couple of things. There was one sort of award that was being given with a fashion sort of education body in in London, and what's somebody else as well, I can't remember now, but we weren't really set up then, so we were sort of, you know, I'm saying we, it's mainly me, but then I was having a bit of help, but so I'm not surprised we didn't get anything, but it takes a bloody long time, but it was useful as well. It's always useful because it makes you kind of really look at what you're doing. So then we only launched a couple of months ago, October, finally, and by now I was really hoping that I'd be able to get the national lottery, you know, the thing, but of course now I'm finding that all these grants really are directed, quite rightly, at businesses that can't survive in lockdown without having, you know, help. So people like people like me that have just started up, it's really hard to find anyone that's prepared to sort of put stuff in. But I'm sure it's out there, and I just got to find it because I do really need it. You know, the nature of what I'm doing is very sort of low income. But once we get going, you know, and get some proper tech behind it, then, you know, but I need it. So yeah, it's really important to me, and I just really want to get it right.
Cool. Well, great. Well, we'll see where we go. Thanks, Jenny. Adrian, you're next in my little Zoom screen at the bottom of the corner.
I'm the odd one out in all this, Mark. I think I'll explain my background and interest, and then actually why I'm here, and that might give you some kind of better sense. So I'm just seeing the postman walk up the path to figure out, does he need to knock on the door, or can he fit it through the letterbox? Drama's on, folks. He's made it. He's made it through the letterbox. That's fine. So, like you, Mark, I used to sit on grant making panels. I also do bits of work directly with some grant making bodies, including some of the frustrations and robust conversations with how they're using their guidance and criteria from time to time. I've also, interestingly, been commissioned to run some kind of short informal sessions on bid writing for groups as well in the past. So I was really particularly interested this morning just to get someone else's perspective on all of this to help me figure out my experiences and adventures in doing it. How off kilter were they, or how actually are they commonplace to us all? Because we don't often get a chance to have these sorts of conversations with each other.
Good point. And I'm hoping, Adrian, actually we'll have a little therapy session at the end for bid writing, because, you know, I mentioned I do a lot of it, you know, and I'm successful sometimes, I'm unsuccessful other times. Okay, and it's always a learning process, all of this, I think. So I'm really open to learning from others as well, and sharing experiences. So we'll do a bit of that later. That's great. Thanks, Adrian. Here we got Dave. I'm sort of leaning back so I can't read the writing. So okay.
Not too scary for you. Hi, yeah, morning everyone. So I'm Dave. I've got a couple of businesses, one called Weatherflare and one called My Spoons. I'm kind of currently bid writing for, I don't know if you know of Invest For, kind of Jenny, I don't know, because you were looking for a grant. That's the big one going around at the moment, and that seems to not just be at the startup stage, so that's that one. And then the other big one for Weatherflare is like trying to get involved on the my big thing is just what one to actually go for, which is for my business, because the Innovation UK has some that are really similar. One that's obviously the Innovate UK is probably a bit generic. I heard that like 2,000 applications go in every kind of thing. So I wanted my bid writing to stand out and kind of not just be lost amongst the other applications, really.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Dave. Have I missed anyone off? That's everyone, isn't it? I believe. Cool. So I was gonna.
I'm shouting. So I didn't get my hand up in time. You missed Sarah off.
Oh, Sarah, of course. Yes. How rude of me.
That's okay. I have zero experience with bid writing. I ran a project for 2 years that was funded, so I've got the experience of kind of reporting and all that side of it, but I've never ever written a bid.
Oh, you've got all that to look forward to, so you're lucky. Or try and avoid it like
I'm just focusing on trade. I understand that better.
Awesome. So I have got a little presentation. I'm not sure if I'll do it actually. I'll go on then. I will do it as well, I suppose. But as I say, there's a few of us, so we can feel free to interrupt, I guess. So where do I start? I think, as I said, I've done a lot of. I'll try and talk multitask. It's never really works that well. Bear with me. Okay. Something should come up in a minute. Let me see. That's not working at all. Okay, forget it. Right, we forget that. What I was going to say is essentially what I found through painful experience of bid writing is that quite often I think a lot of your bids fail before you even start. Because you're looking at the wrong ones, or you're looking in the wrong places, and you haven't done your homework. Okay, so my first sort of tip essentially is just being really prepared, do the groundwork. So Jenny, you were saying about you know, I've seen the lottery. It's the one everyone thinks of, isn't it? You know, it's the most high profile bid, and sure, it can be a great place to find funds, but hey, everyone's looking at that one as well, aren't they? So you know, hunt around a bit. It's not the only funder, is what I was saying. I think, you know, there's loads of resources out there that help you find the funds and narrow down your search. So if there's hundreds and hundreds of charitable trusts, you know, public, European, national, local grant making bodies, yeah, thousands actually, yes, that's true. Possibly the high thousands as well, I would say. And what you know, casting your net that wide, it's great, you've got lots of fish to catch, but you might want to narrow it down. Okay, so use the grant searching tools that are available initially, and there's loads out there. And Adrian, I'll be grateful if you can share some in the chat while I talk as well. So there's, you know, there's one that comes to mind is Funding Central, which is a really useful resource. I would say like the local councils are really useful as well. They have mailing lists, as do your like Brighton and Hove Community Works, for example. East Sussex County Council has one as well, and they will update you and provide updates into your inbox of new funding, and you can narrow the searching down to your type of legal structure, to your area of interest, you know, to what you do, to the sort of types of outcomes, of types of people that you're working with. Okay, so that is, and you can even narrow it down geographically as well. So that really helps when you're searching, because otherwise it's really daunting, and you're just looking at all of these things, trawling through all these websites and think, no, that's not for me, that's not for me, that's not for me, they don't fund that type of organisation, etc., etc. So use those grant funding bodies to help you, searching bodies to help you. The next thing, I suppose, building on that, is, I guess, you know, really doing your homework. Once you've narrowed it down, and you know, to say from thousands to, you know, maybe 150 or something like that, it's still quite a lot to trawl through. You know, start to be organised. Look at like deadline dates, for example. So if there's one that's coming up tomorrow, forget it. Yeah, you're not going to do it. You're not going to get it done. You need quite a lot of lead-in time for these grants, because quite often they're fairly complicated as well. So not all the time, and you can rush them through and have success. I've done that before. It can sort of help focus the focus the mind sometimes, isn't it? You know, an upcoming sort of deadline. But what I'd say is, you know, try and narrow it down, sort of cut out some more by sort of deadline date is one good one. Quite often you'll see you can do searches whether they're closed or open at the moment as well, so that narrows it down even more. So you're sort of whittling away at the list. The next bit is actually go onto the websites, speak to them if you can. That's really useful, I find. Actually, or you know, email introduction, call them up for further information. It establishes a relationship early on. It puts you in the forefront of their mind. I've had quite a lot of success doing that, actually. It's not something I particularly like doing, actually, cold sort of calling people, but it can actually help. It's sort of a sales technique, really. It puts you at the forefront of their mind. But read their website, look at who they're about, what sort of feel they have, what their ethos is, what they're looking for, okay, what they're looking to fund. I found that people quite often just go for completely the wrong funder. They'll say, you know, we fund children and dogs, or something like that, you know, children and fluffy animals. And you don't actually work with children and fluffy animals, but you'll decide to go for that bid and sort of say, oh, but sometimes a fluffy animal walks into my session, and you try and bend your project to suit the funder. Don't do that. Stick to what you're good at, stick to what you know, stick to your impact, and try and find the funder that suits. So you need to read the guidelines, okay? Really read the guidelines as well. That's a really good tip, actually, Adrian. Yeah, talking to other people, find out who has funded them. If they do similar work to you, yeah. Quite often, actually, a good tip I do is look at similar organisations, even if I don't know them. At the bottom of their website, it says funded by or supported by XXX. And you think, oh, that's one I haven't thought about, actually, so I'll go for that one. Where was I? So read the guidelines. In those guidelines, that will tell you all about who is eligible to apply, and you might not be one of them, so that will narrow it down even more. Okay, there might be restrictions on that they just fund charities and they don't fund CICs. You'll find that. Hopefully you've eliminated some of that in the search, but the search engines, I find, are never quite that good at those sorts of things. But so really check the guidelines. You might be excluded. You might need 3 directors and you've only got 2. Okay, so you'll be cut out at the first stage. Really read the guidelines. Can't say it anymore. So that's basically my top tip. I'll put the glasses on because I can't actually read what I'm saying. Yeah, and start to be organized, really. I think at the beginning is really important. So keep a database or a spreadsheet. You might have a CRM system. You might just have an Excel spreadsheet of funders, when the deadline date is, when the decision date is, because that can be important in planning your projects. So some of them take an age and forever to make a decision. You know, it might be 6 months before you actually hear back from them, and then they say no. So that's great. So, you know, look at the deadline, see how much, what type of funding, what type of things they pay for as well. So some of them might just fund, some of them might fund your core costs, which is brilliant, yeah? So that's just going to support your organization. Some of them might just fund specific things. So compile a spreadsheet with these things, the funding amounts, when the deadline is, you know, dates, when you heard, yes or no, that type of thing. So be organized. And on that theme, this is all the boring stuff, yeah, but it's really important because it will save you time, is get a folder of things you'll need for pretty much every application ready. So sort of background documents. So that will be things like your governing document, you know, constitution or Mems and Arts, whatever that is. Bank statements. They always ask for your most recent bank statements. So keep that updated. They'll ask for your accounts, most recent accounts. That could be an issue of your new organisation. So sometimes you might have to have a conversation with the funder. Some of them state that they will fund new organisations. Some of them actually say, I will only fund you if you've published one set of accounts. But sometimes a conversation can help you get around that, I've found. Not always, but they might ask for you know, just a sort of simple projected budget or projected cash flow for the year instead of accounts. So be prepared for that sort of thing. Do your budgets beforehand. So figuring out what your project is, okay? And that's really important, actually. It's the sort of core to all of this before you're actually searching for the funding and going for the funders. You need to know what it is you're going to fund, don't you? it's pretty obvious, but you'll be surprised actually that that people just go, I'm going to go and get some funding. Okay, well, what's it for then? You need to work out a project plan, a project brief initially at the outset. So what I would encourage you to do actually, if you had a sort of take home action from all of this, would be to prepare a sort of very basic 1 or 2 page project outline of what it is that you're looking for funding for, because it will help to get your brain into that way of thinking. Because a funder, essentially, they always ask for the same things, and you need to know what you want to deliver. So you need a summary of the project, of what you want to achieve. Who is it aimed at? What are the main outcomes that you're seeking to achieve from it, the main impact? Okay, just as sort of an overview. And you need to essentially break it down after that into, you know, to sort of think, how do you know there's a need for the project, for what you do? Have you got any evidence to back that up? Are there any stats? Are there any have you had any feedback from clients? Have you done any surveys, that type of thing? So a little bit of evidence. So there'll be sort of, and this will mirror quite a lot of what you find in the bids. Okay. So if you prepare this beforehand, it gets you into the way of thinking. So an overview, defining who it is you're working with, defining what the need is, defining what you're doing to actually meet the issues that you've identified. It's kind of like, you know, Jenny, if you were you've been preparing, or Dave, you know, your projects in those early stages. It's like knowing your impact, isn't it? It's knowing what you're doing inside out, and it's so important to have that straight before you even think about funded bids, I reckon. And you've been through all of that already in sort of, you know, defining what you do, being really concise about telling people what you do and what your story is. I think is super important. Who you're helping, what your impact is. And, you know, if you can summarize that on a sheet, and we'll look at the sort of different headings that funders use in a minute, it's really helpful if you do that beforehand. It's into the way of thinking, and think about obviously what it is you need. You know, what are you needing this funding for? People, you know, is it people? Is it stuff? Is it things? Is it to actually run a new project? Is it to continue to continue your current work, your existing work? You know, think about that. What is it you're actually looking for this funding for? Is it to trial out something new, which can be quite interesting, I think, and a quite good use of grant funding. So yeah, let's skip. I'm going to skip through really what funders are looking for. So we've done the homework, we've done the groundwork already. You're really prepared. You've drafted your kind of project overview. So you'll find that all the funders pretty much ask the same things, which is good in a way. They'll ask them slightly differently. And they will have, as Adrian sort of pointed out, they will have their own expectations of what their priorities are in the funding. So I'm trying to read the chat as we go along, which I struggle to actually see. It's, I can just about see it. Yeah. So essentially, they will have their own sort of slants. Different funders. They'll say our theme this year is to support socially disadvantaged children with mental health problems due to the pandemic or something like that. Okay. Or whatever it is, environmental causes or whatever. So that hopefully you'd have narrowed it down so your broad your outcomes and your impact broadly aligns with that of the funder. Okay, and I guess they're wanting to see that link and thinking that we can work together with you, that we'd actually like to fund you, because you're doing something that we believe in and you're helping us achieve our impact of what we want to achieve. So that is the trick in all of this, I guess, is to persuade the funder that what you're doing is helping them to achieve their outcomes. Okay, so you need to make that really clear in the funding bid. Okay, and that's super important. So, but what I would say is don't chase the wrong funder. Don't try and shoehorn what you do if it's really not a fit. So you really have to narrow that down. Okay. So what are they looking for? So essentially, they'll ask you a series of questions. You'll have seen some of this before if you've had experience of it or looked at any funding form. They will ask you, what does the organisation do? So you need to be really concise on that and don't waffle on for ages. We have founded this, then we did this, then we did that, then we did that. Be really concise with that. I'm sure Adrian can back me up here. I've reviewed numerous grant applications. The ones that waffle on and on, you just lose the will to live with them, to be honest. So you've got to try and be concise, punchy, and persuasive, really, at that outset. And if you can get in to that opening sort of statement, some way of aligning to showing that you're aligned to their aims, that's really good. So your aims might be very similar to them. What you do, it does actually help socially disadvantaged children with mental health problems, for example. So you're rather than if it does. So that's where you make that sort of opening sort of statement. Then they will ask you essentially about who you work with. There might be a tick box there, and which is great, and then that saves you writing loads about it. But you might need to describe the people that you're supporting. Then they'll ask you, and these might vary in order, I guess, is the need. We spoke about that earlier. What is the need? How do you know that your project is needed? So describe the problems, really. So if you're thinking about it in marketing terms and stuff like that, it's the problems that you can help solve for the people that you're working with. So it's describing who you're working with, what the main issues are, and how you know that how you found out that they're issues. Okay, so that's where you get lots of good stats, and I can post some resources in the Slack and things for where to look for these. And this is where it's really important to build in collecting feedback and actually asking the people you work with those questions, essentially. So before you've done a lot of this bid work, hopefully you've got an ongoing dialogue with the people that you're supporting through your work, so you actually know what the problem is. Then it will ask you, okay, well, what are you seeking to achieve then? What's the project? So it's where you outline the project, what you're going to do. Okay, and again, just be really clear, and this is where you need to be quite specific on things like we're going to deliver X, Y, and Z. So your sort of outputs, we want to put on 8 sessions, workshops throughout the year, attended by X amount of people. So be quite specific, but don't over. What I would say is don't be ridiculous. Be realistic. Okay, with that. Don't overpromise. you know, quality is sometimes better than quantity with that. So following on from that is what are the outcomes you're going to achieve. And you might actually work with a really small cohort of people, but you might make life-changing impacts on them. So really think through what the outcomes, and this is where it's good, hopefully, that your outcomes will help the funder achieve their outcomes. So there's some mirroring there. So that's where you get in that sort of clever sort of writing, I guess, that, you know, you mention their outcomes within it, you know, within that. And I think that really helps. So really be clear on what your impact is. Super important. Then I guess they sometimes ask about you and your experience of delivering. So again, that's useful to know. Everyone likes talking about themselves, but don't go on too much. Okay. No one wants to know what your qualifications, your A levels, or whatever, like whatever it is. You know, just be succinct with that, just about the experience of the organisation. And then they'll go to the budget essentially, and some of them might ask for match funding from other funders. Some of them might see themselves as contributing only a bit to the budget. Some of them might pay for the whole project. Okay, and there'll be options to state that. So it's important to do that work beforehand to actually know what it is you're asking for. Okay. And have I forgotten anything there, Adrian? Are there any other bits to the funding bids that I've forgotten there? Because that is it in a very whiz bang way. That is, they're all very similar, essentially. All of these. Once you start, and what I would say is, you'll find a lot of them are online these days as well. So obviously don't just do it online. Do it beforehand and get people to read it. I think is really useful. Try not to use loads of jargon, which the funder, being on the other side, I haven't got a clue what a VAAC is, you know, or a NACDA. You know, it might mean a lot to you. It doesn't mean anything to me. So write in plain English. Be very clear and concise in your writing and persuasive. And put in, I think the human element is really important in it as well. So anything like quotes from people that have used your services, links to videos, even if the funder accepts that, it's all really useful. Don't send in loads of extra bump because the funder won't read it generally. Just send in the bump that they ask for. You know, there'll be a place on the form usually to attach your documents, which you've already got saved in a nice place. So you know, that's it really. I mean, what I would say, it's you learn through failing, really, with bid writing, and don't be too discouraged by the failure. You know, I still get a kick in the stomach when I get turned down by a funder. It doesn't feel great, but actually, you look back at it and review what you've done and try and ask for feedback. Not all of them do give feedback, unfortunately, because they're too busy. But the ones that do, it's really, really important to get that feedback. Okay, because you learn from it, and you think, you know, I've looked at bids and I thought I've rushed that bid. I can tell I've rushed it, you know, and that's why we didn't get it. So give yourself time, and that is the main thing. I think is it does actually take quite a bit of time, but once you've done, got a few under your belt, you can use those and adapt them to the funder. Don't just copy and paste them over. I find that a bit, you can sort of tell when you're reviewing it, I think, as a funder, that it's been copy and pasted, particularly if they're left in the previous funder's name, which I've read before actually. You can use the basis of it because they're all asking the same questions, and it will save you time. But personalize it, personalize each one to suit the funder that you're looking for. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now and open it up for sort of discussion, because I want this to be, you know, I want your thoughts really on what you think and any questions.
Great,
just to provoke them, Mark, I agree with all of that, and I also disagree with it. I agree with it on the basis that if we're targeting a funder who has a preset application form, absolutely. However, most funders out there don't have an application form, so we have to get really good at storytelling.
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
difficulty
Sorry,
on those ones, we can all tell great stories, but in those instances, we also still have to take those precepts that you were saying about the evidence, the need, the outcomes, and almost make it a boring textbook story, but without losing the excitement. And interesting, so there's some groups that I've worked with where their strategy has been, rather than go for the Garfield Weston, the lottery, the Tudor Trust, hang it all on one horse. They've said, we'll send out like 200 of these non-application form bids that are we'll write our story in a couple of pages, buy the stamps, and then if that comes back in on the basis of the hit rate we can probably get from them, that will make up what we need. And then we don't have to do any reporting, which is great.
And you're right.
Downside of other grants is the risk of clawback.
That's a good point. And I guess I was coming at it from a more established funded background, but you're right, because I've been writing loads of those at the moment. They're very small charitable trusts. They're like sort of £5,000, £3,000, but if you stitch them all together, obviously it makes up lots of thousands of pounds. And you get better at it, I think, as you go along. It's a bit like writing a story, and it is like redrafting a novel, I think, a lot of it, but a very short one, obviously, a short story, should we say, because you're wanting to sew in those elements that I talked about, what the need is, etc., etc. But you've got to grab them, haven't you? But you've still got to appeal to what their particular interest is. So with those charitable trusts, it can be quite hard to find out any information. So I'd encourage you. So they quite often don't have websites, or they'll just, you find them on like funding searches, and it says write to the secretary, such, and they're always in Belgravia or something like that. I find, because they've got oceans of money, legacies and things. But if you go on a charity commission website, and find and search them up, look for their accounts and their annual returns, because it will tell you a bit more about them and about the sort of figures they fund, how many people they've funded, the types of organisations, and a bit about their sort of policy and what their aims are as well. So that's a good tip. And you're right, it's telling a story, and you have to get good at describing what you do succinctly, persuasively, and in an engaging way, not a really dry way, because they get hundreds and hundreds of these, sent in all the time. So what's going to make you stand out, I suppose?
On that, Mark, would you say there's a certain section where you can shine more? Like, what elements do you think will make more of a difference in terms of, is it around the need and your solution being more innovative, or what area do you think people actually have an opportunity to be more captivating?
Yeah, I think actually quite often it's about the impact. For me, and this is my personal view, sort of off the cuff, really. It's describing, and that's where you get passionate, isn't it? It's describing the impacts you have, and to try and craft in some of the human element there. So having, some of the most powerful things I've put in with one of the organisations I work with is a sort of statement, sort of little, almost like a case study or a sort of testimony from a client who's saying, I was basically, sleeping in a graveyard this time last year, injecting drugs, etc., etc. And, through the support of this organisation, I've done X, Y, and Z, and now I'm doing this. And, and that sort of thing is a lot more powerful than sort of, these are the outcomes we're seeking. You want that in there as well, but having something that brings it to life like that, I think is really useful. So knowing what your impact is and collecting as much information as you can on it, and crafting that into your organization is, that's going to help with your success of your bids, really. And there's so many organizations, in my experience, are rubbish at doing it, or don't. They just get on and do stuff, and they're just not as good. They're frightened of it, almost, of thinking, oh, it's too much, it's too difficult to collect information about impact. But if you don't do that, A, how do you know that what you're doing is having an impact? And B, it's going to be really, really hard to get the stuff funded if you are going for grant funding without being able to describe it.
Yeah. Jenny and Dave, did either of you have a question? I think Dave, you popped one in the chat earlier, didn't you?
Sorry, it's just the classic of how do we kind of pay ourselves during all this kind of grant writing and stuff like that. Really, it seems like it's a bit, you got to be a bit underhand about it, or I don't know where it all sits, really. It's
How do you pay yourself?
Sorry,
how do you pay yourself, do you say?
Yeah,
Dave?
basically, if your only source is initially going to be from grants and stuff, how do you support what you've already put into the business? Or just how do you pay yourself from going, I've heard different, I've just come back, I've heard different things. I spoke to one person that was like, take your budget and double it, because that's what you've ended up putting into the business. And I'm a little bit like, that doesn't sit right. And then the other thing is, right, the business is not, if I receive a grant, like the business, in my terms of thing, all the software and stuff needs about a 4 or 5 month period of being built. So what do I do in that kind of time?
It's actually a question I had as well, is how common is it to be able to get funding to pay yourself or to pay people, and what are the common things you can expect in terms of funding, and are there some that are just a no, and so you can actually understand how to finance, I guess, forecast as well?
Yeah, I mean, paying yourself, it depends on the funded, doesn't it? Obviously, some will be for capital equipment, some will be for revenue costs, and usually they're quite happy as long as it's helping you achieve the outcome. Either some of them will be for project costs, so delivery costs, I suppose. So if it's just you delivering it, it's that's you put it in there. They might be looking that you're employing other people to deliver things, so it goes in there. But you also have like management costs and core costs, which you can get things like that's where you can be a bit creative and think about things like business development as headings, because funders, I find, are becoming increasingly sort of okay about those things. And they're looking at you wanting to expand what you do as well, so that they know that you need to think about that as well. So they do. Some funders have an element of core costs that they support, others don't. So you can be a bit creative and hide things in budget lines, but don't be too dishonest, I suppose. But it's some funders are better than others at supporting core costs, and some will actually just fund core costs, which is quite useful, and don't specify. And some of the smaller ones actually can be quite good, as Adrian says, in terms of they will just make a contribution to the organisation, so you can spend it kind of how you like, really. They're about funding what you do rather than specific things. So I'd encourage you to try and get as much of that if you can. But it's difficult, though. I mean, maybe I can have a chat with you another time about your specific project and your idea, to get my head around it a bit more, I suppose, in terms of what would be the appropriate route for you to take. Because
Mark, in terms of like admin, so I've only ever worked with a big lottery funded project, which was like a lot in terms of, one, I know for costs, like we had to have receipts and all those kind of things in terms of reporting, as well as doing other reporting. can you just touch upon that a little bit in terms of what people can expect
Yeah.
to give back in terms of returning for their money?
Yeah, and that's why I think it's really important to find out at the outset. So if it's going to be, you know, like a European funding is notorious for admin, as you probably well know, and you know, it's, you know, keep everything and, you know, duplicate it and keep it for 100 years, and, you know, stand on your head and you know, do a little dance and send it back to them. It's, you know, so that, but often they state that, you know, fish around in the guidelines as well about what the reporting, the terms and conditions are before you put the application in, is what I would say to that, because they are all different. You know, like very small ones, quite often there's barely anything. But sometimes actually some of the smaller ones, they ask for just as much, particularly I found if they're through like the council and stuff like that. So some of the small charitable trusts might not actually ask for anything. But as a rule of thumb, it's obviously really good to keep records of what you've spent, yeah, because you need to for accounting and for your business anyway. So do keep that, and just be aware that some funders ask for more stuff. Generally, it will relate to the size of the bid, won't it? But not always. But do the homework beforehand on that, because you don't want any nasty surprises. That, and particularly if you haven't factored that into your budget as well, that, you know, oh no, we've got to collect loads of monitoring and evaluation and do a really big long report, and actually we don't have any time or people to do that. So you need to think about that before you put in the bid, and be clear about what the procedures are. And they should tell you before you bid, put the bid in.
Great. Jenny, did you have any questions, or yeah, anyone wants to share any experiences, discuss certain points?
Well, I think this the creative, you know, what you've just been talking about, the creativity of wording is, I think that's really key, really, because and absolutely not to be underhand, but, you know, they must know at the heart that, you know, creativity is used, and so you know, buzzwords that would be useful. I mean, you're saying, you know, maybe business development costs. I mean, you know, operational costs, I don't know, core costs, you said, because, like, for me, there is two things. There's either the tech that I'm going to be trying for, which is very specific, I suppose, or really the big cost for me is getting people in to help me, you know, so it's not just me. So it is paying people, and I know that that's not always, you know, the popular thing, or the thing that they want to fund, but that's what I need, sort of thing. So I mean, again, I suppose that, you know, when you're doing your filtering, you're looking at that, but I feel that there must be some sort of creative wording that you can use that will cover you. I don't know.
Yeah. No,
yeah, and start off small is, you know, if you're starting out,
yeah,
you might want to get a few local ones under your belt that are quite helpful, I find. You know, rather than doing some sort of massive bid that you might not be prepared for. It builds a bit of confidence. You know, some of the, like, I think I've mentioned to one before, like the Chalk Cliff Trust locally here. Yeah, they're great. Yeah, they ask no questions. It's one page. If every funder could be like that, I'd be a really happy man.
I didn't get it though, unfortunately.
Oh no!
Yeah, I tried a couple of months ago, and they sent a very nice thing back, but it was no, and I don't really understand why, to be honest. And it took quite a lot of time to kind of get an answer from them. And, you know, I did have I had £500 from Unlimited when I was very first starting. Absolutely brilliant. And I was there again. I would have loved to have gone back to them, but again, they're very much specific to areas that are very low income areas and things like that. You know, so they're not being as general as they were, kind of thing. So yeah, I did try this, but But yes, I just have to, I mean, I have looked at the local government, and sorry, the local council and things like that, and I'm sort of compiling lists of people to contact, and I suppose it's just, I just keep looking, really.
And talk to other people, yeah. Talk to the network, reach out to the networks that you're involved with, and saying, you know, who's had success with what, you know, hopefully people willing to share that sort of stuff. You know, which ones are good ones to go for. It's you know, I'm always got my ear to the ground for that sort of thing as well. I'd like to find out, you know, from other people who found like a good funder that really suits what they do. Just share it, please. You know, don't keep it to yourself. Although some people might want to. But yeah, no, it's a, you need to, you know, it's quite good to get feedback, I think, from other people. If it's not from the funder, perhaps there's a peer or you know, someone in the network or myself or something who could, you know, give some feedback on the bids that you've been writing, and just sort of say, well, you know, maybe you could have done it like this or whatever. Essentially, you know, have you thought about mentioning that you're underselling yourself or whatever? So it's a confidence thing, I think, and it's like redrafting a book. You know, you kind of have to go through sort of several iterations of these things before you're sort of happy with what you're doing. And it's not, you're constantly evolving with it. So I don't think there's, you know, there's different, I don't know, sort of, it's difficult. I don't think I'm necessarily always the best on the best form that I could be. You know, it's about being prepared. It's about having the brain space to actually do it as well, because it's
absolutely
involving, and having the time and taking the time and setting aside time to actually do these things. I think is a challenge sometimes for people, and even for me, who actually, you know, sort of does it professionally for other people. It's like there's lots of distractions in the house. You know, it's, you've got to be in the right frame of mind, I think, is what I'm saying, and you've got to feel passionate about what you're involved in.